It was supposed to be a regular flight, a quick work trip like so many others before. The airport buzzed with the usual chaos: business people on their phones, families juggling luggage, and the occasional weary traveler searching for coffee. Among the crowd stood Erica Williams, a sharp, composed woman in her early 30s, dressed in a tailored black suit. She exuded confidence, the kind that made people take a second glance, but Erica was used to flying under the radar. She liked it that way. What mattered was her work, not drawing attention to herself. As Erica approached the gate, she noticed the subtle shift in the air. A gate agent, middle-aged and stern-faced, was eyeing her as she handed over her boarding pass. For a moment, nothing seemed unusual. Then the agent's hand froze mid-scan, and her eyes narrowed. "I need you to step aside, ma'am," the agent said, her voice clipped and authoritative. Erica blinked, momentarily caught off guard. "Is there a problem?" she asked, keeping her tone calm. The agent didn't answer. Instead, she motioned toward another staff member, who approached with the same suspicious look. Passengers behind Erica began murmuring, craning their necks to see what was happening. The familiar hum of the airport felt heavier now, more focused. Erica could feel their eyes on her, the unspoken questions hanging in the air. She took a deep breath. This wasn't the first time she'd felt scrutinized. Being a black woman in spaces like these often came with an unspoken layer of suspicion, but something about this felt different. She could sense the weight of judgment, of assumptions being made before she'd even had the chance to explain. "Ma'am, we need to verify some information," the second staff member said, avoiding eye contact. "Please step over here." Erica's jaw tightened. She glanced around, noting the shifting expressions in the crowd, some curious, others openly disapproving. It was the kind of moment that could easily spiral out of control. But Erica had learned long ago how to keep her composure, even when everything inside her screamed for justice. She followed the staff member to a small podium near the gate, aware that every step she took felt heavier under the weight of watchful eyes. "Can you explain what this is about?" Erica asked again, her voice steady but firm. The gate agent hesitated. "Your boarding pass flagged an issue," she said vaguely, as if trying to avoid specifics. Erica raised an eyebrow. "An issue," she echoed. "What kind of issue?" The agent glanced at her colleague, who shifted uncomfortably before replying. "We can't disclose that right now, but we need to confirm your identity." Erica reached into her bag, pulling out her ID. She handed it over, keeping her expression neutral even as frustration simmered beneath the surface. The agent examined it closely, then whispered something to her coworker. Whatever they were discussing, it wasn't good. "Is this really necessary?" Erica asked, glancing at the clock. Her flight was boarding, and the last thing she needed was to miss it because of some vague issue. "We're just following protocol," the agent replied, her tone firm but evasive. The murmurs from the crowd grew louder. Erica caught snippets of their conversation, assumptions, accusations, judgments being made without a shred of context. And then the unthinkable happened. The agent leaned in, lowering her voice but not her authority. "We're going to have to deny you boarding," she said. Erica froze, her mind racing. Denied boarding? On what grounds? She'd done nothing wrong. Her ticket was valid, her documents in order. This couldn't be happening. "I'm sorry, but that's not an option," Erica said, her voice laced with calm determination. "I have every right to be on that flight." The agent's expression hardened. "If you don't comply, we'll have to involve security." The tension was palpable now, a weight pressing down on the room. Erica took another deep breath, her instincts kicking in. She reached into her bag again, but this time she pulled out something different, something that immediately changed the energy in the room. She held up her FBI badge. The agent's eyes widened, her face draining of color. The whispers in the crowd grew to a collective gasp as people realized what was happening. And just like that, the balance of power shifted. The room seemed to hold its breath as Erica's FBI badge caught the overhead lights, its gold and blue seal unmistakable. The gate agent, who only moments ago had been wielding her authority with unwavering confidence, now looked visibly shaken. She glanced from the badge to Erica's face, her mouth opening as if to speak, but no words coming out. The whispers from the nearby passengers turned into a low murmur, their curiosity reaching a fever pitch. What was happening? Who was this woman? Why was she being stopped? And now, why did she have an FBI badge? Erica, ever composed, held the badge steady in her hand, her sharp eyes fixed on the agent. "Now can someone explain why exactly I'm being denied boarding?" she asked, her voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade. The agent stammered, her earlier demeanor crumbling under the weight of the revelation. I didn't know," she said finally, her words faltering. "It's just that. Your name came up on a list, and we were told." She stopped herself, as if realizing she'd already said too much. "A list," Erica repeated, her tone calm, but laced with an edge that demanded answers. "What kind of list?" The second staff member, who had been standing silently until now, stepped forward, his face pale. "It's a security protocol, ma'am. Sometimes names flag for additional screening. It doesn't mean anything, necessarily." Erica's jaw tightened, though she kept her composure. She was no stranger to these kinds of situations. As an FBI agent, she was trained to remain calm under pressure, but as a Black woman, she had experienced her fair share of unwarranted suspicion. This, however, felt different. There was something about the way they had approached her, something unspoken but deeply ingrained in their actions. It wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was profiling, plain and simple. "Let me get this straight," Erica said, her voice steady. "You flagged me based on a list you won't explain, refused to tell me why, and now you're denying me boarding without cause. Is that accurate?" The agent opened her mouth, but no response came. Instead, she glanced toward the growing crowd of onlookers. It was clear she wasn't used to being challenged, and certainly not by someone who carried the authority Erica now displayed. Erica didn't wait for a response. She stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to ensure only the staff could hear. "Let me make something clear," she said, her tone firm but not aggressive. "You're about to escalate a situation without justification. I suggest you think carefully about your next move." The agent hesitated, her gaze flicking between Erica's badge and her face. It was a moment of indecision, a battle between the power she thought she held and the reality of the situation she created. But Erica's mind wasn't only on the confrontation. Her instincts as an investigator had already kicked in. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than met the eye. The way the agent had mentioned a list and then stopped herself, it was as if she'd touched on something she wasn't supposed to. Was this just a routine case of airport profiling, or was there something deeper at play? As the tension stretched, Erica's thoughts drifted back to the days leading up to this moment. She had been working on a high-stakes investigation involving a complex web of organized crime, international smuggling, and financial fraud. The kind of case that required every ounce of focus and discretion. She'd been traveling under her real name, standard practice unless undercover, but something about the way her name had flagged raised an unsettling possibility. Had someone on the other side of her case caught wind of her movements? Was this a coincidence, or was it deliberate? Her heart raced, though she didn't show it. If her name had been flagged intentionally, it could mean her cover, or worse, her safety, was at risk. But she couldn't jump to conclusions. Not yet. "Ma'am," the second staff member finally spoke, his voice hesitant. "We're just following protocol. If you could step over here, we'll sort this out as quickly as possible." Erica didn't move. She could feel the weight of the crowd's stares, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. But she wasn't about to be sidelined. Not now, not like this. "Listen," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "I don't think you understand the gravity of the situation you've created. I'm not just another passenger. I am a federal agent on official business, and your actions are obstructing my ability to do my job. If you want to resolve this, I suggest you start by giving me a clear explanation of why I'm being targeted." The man hesitated, clearly out of his depth. Erica could see the internal conflict playing out on his face. He wanted to de-escalate, but he didn't know how. The first agent, meanwhile, seemed frozen, her earlier confidence shattered. Erica decided to take control. "Fine," she said, her tone sharp. "If you're not willing to explain, I'll make a call." She pulled out her phone, scrolling quickly through her contacts. If the situation wasn't going to resolve itself, she'd escalate it her way. But as she was about to press the call button, something caught her eye. A man standing near the gate, dressed in an unassuming grey hoodie and jeans, was watching her intently. He wasn't just curious, like the rest of the crowd. His gaze was too focused, too calculating. When he realized she'd noticed him, he quickly turned away, pretending to check his phone. Erica's instincts went on high alert. Something about him felt off, his demeanor, his timing, the way he'd been lingering near the gate but hadn't joined the boarding line. Was he part of this? Watching to see how she'd react. Her grip tightened on her phone. She'd dealt with threats before, but the idea that someone could be monitoring her movements, even here, sent a chill down her spine. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. The gate agent cleared her throat, breaking Erica's focus. "Ma'am," she said, her voice small now. "We can take this to a private area if you prefer." Erica shook her head. "No, we'll handle this right here." The tension in the air was unbearable, the crowd now practically buzzing with speculation. But Erica wasn't backing down, not until she knew exactly what was going on. And as she stood there, FBI badge still in hand, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Erica stood her ground, her FBI badge still in plain view, the tension swirling around her like a storm. The gate agents exchanged uneasy glances, clearly unsure of how to proceed. Behind her, the crowd buzzed with murmurs, speculation running wild about the drama unfolding before their eyes. But Erica's focus wasn't on them anymore. Her mind was racing, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle she didn't yet understand. She glanced back toward the man in the grey hoodie. He was still there, standing near the terminal windows, his body angled just enough to keep her in his peripheral vision. He wasn't making it obvious, but Erica could tell he was watching. She'd trained long enough to notice the subtle signs, his deliberate stillness, the way he avoided looking directly at her, the tension in his posture. He was waiting for something. Her instincts screamed that this wasn't a coincidence. Whoever he was, he didn't belong here, not in the casual way other passengers milled about, checking their phones or chatting nervously about delays. He had purpose, and she had the sinking feeling it had something to do with her. The gate agent's voice broke through her thoughts, timid but insistent. "Ma'am, we really need to take this conversation somewhere private." Erica turned to her, leveling a calm but pointed stare. "I told you. We'll handle this here." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Unless, of course, you'd like to explain why you flagged a federal agent without cause." The woman opened her mouth, then closed it again, clearly flustered. Erica could feel the balance of power shifting further in her favor, but it didn't ease the tension knotting in her chest. Something bigger was at play here, and she needed to figure out what it was, fast. Her phone buzzed in her hand, breaking the momentary stalemate. She glanced down at the screen. It was a text from a secure contact, one of her colleagues at the bureau. The message was short, but it hit her like a jolt of electricity. Asterisk, asterisk, name flagged. Possible leak. Stay alert. Asterisk, asterisk. Her stomach dropped. A leak? The implications of that single word were staggering. If someone within the bureau had compromised her identity or movements, it could mean her case, and her safety was in serious jeopardy. She looked up, her gaze snapping back to the man in the hoodie. He was gone. Her pulse quickened as she scanned the terminal, searching for any sign of him. Nothing. It was as if he'd vanished into thin air. The gate agent spoke again, her voice cutting through Erica's rising unease. "Ma'am, if there's an issue, we can involve airport security." Erica held up a hand, silencing her. "You've done enough," she said sharply. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away from the gate, her mind racing. She moved quickly, her eyes scanning the crowd, her senses on high alert. If the man in the hoodie was watching her, or worse, following her, she needed to flush him out. But as she made her way through the terminal, weaving through clusters of passengers and dodging rolling suitcases, she realized she was no longer just looking for him. She was looking for patterns, for anything out of place. A man in a suit with no luggage, lingering too long by the coffee kiosk. A woman pretending to scroll on her phone, but glancing up every few seconds. A group of travelers huddled together, speaking too softly for a public space. Any of them could be watching her, waiting for her next move. She stopped near a row of seats by the windows, her back to the glass so she could see the room in front of her. Pulling out her phone, she typed a quick reply to her colleague's message. She hit send, her fingers trembling slightly. The stakes were higher now, and every second felt like borrowed time. Her phone buzzed almost immediately with a response. Asterisk asterisk still tracing source. Stay visible. Do not engage alone. Asterisk asterisk. Erica clenched her jaw. Stay visible. It was sound advice. Staying in a crowded, public area would minimize the risk of an ambush. But it also meant she was a sitting target. She hated feeling exposed, but she didn't have a choice. Not yet. As she waited for her colleague to send more information, she caught a flash of movement out of the corner of her eye. It was subtle. A man in a dark jacket, slipping through the doors marked employees only. He wasn't airport staff, she was sure of it. Her instincts told her he was connected to this somehow, but without backup, following him would be reckless. She stayed put, forcing herself to think through her next move. If her name had been flagged, and if the man in the hoodie, or anyone else, was part of that, it meant her investigation had been compromised. The question was how much? And by whom? The thought sent a fresh wave of anxiety through her. The case she was working on wasn't just sensitive, it was dangerous. It involved high-level operatives in an international smuggling ring, people with the resources and connections to make problems disappear permanently. If they discovered her identity, her presence here wasn't just a coincidence, it was a trap. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her from her thoughts. The message was a single word, asterisk asterisk run. Asterisk asterisk. Her heart stopped. She didn't wait to question it. Grabbing her bag, she moved swiftly toward the nearest exit, her eyes darting around the terminal as she went. The crowd suddenly felt suffocating, every face a potential threat. Behind her, she thought she heard someone call her name, but she didn't look back. She couldn't afford to. Her focus was on getting out of the terminal and finding a secure location where she could regroup and figure out her next move. As she reached the doors to the parking garage, she felt the unmistakable sensation of being followed. Her skin prickled, adrenaline surging through her veins. She turned her head just enough to catch a glimpse of movement, a shadow, a figure blending too easily into the crowd. She didn't wait to confirm. She broke into a run, the sound of her heels echoing against the concrete as she darted between rows of parked cars. Her breath came fast and shallow, her mind racing through scenarios and escape routes. She needed to get to her car, or at least somewhere she could call for backup. But as she rounded a corner, she skidded to a stop. The man in the grey hoodie stood in front of her, blocking her path. His face was calm, almost too calm, but his eyes told a different story. He wasn't here by accident. "Agent Williams," he said, his voice low and even. "We need to talk." Erica's hand instinctively went to her side, where her firearm was concealed beneath her blazer. She didn't draw it. Not yet. She needed to know who he was and what he wanted. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. The man didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket slowly, deliberately, and pulled out something small and metallic. It wasn't a weapon. It was a badge. The man's badge gleamed in the dim light of the parking garage, but it didn't offer any comfort. Erica's eyes narrowed, instinctively taking a step back, her fingers still brushing the grip of her firearm. She wasn't ready to draw, not yet, but she was certainly prepared for whatever was coming next. Her mind raced, trying to process what was happening. Another FBI agent, but why was he following her? What did he know that she didn't? "Who are you?" she asked again, this time her voice firmer, cutting through the tension hanging in the air. The man didn't immediately answer. He just held the badge out a little further, as if it should explain everything. But Erica wasn't convinced. Not by the badge, not by the calmness in his demeanor, and certainly not by the way he stood blocking her only escape route. "I asked you a question," Erica pressed, her eyes locked on his. The man finally spoke, his tone level, unhurried. "I'm Agent Caleb Myers. We've been looking into the same operation." His eyes flickered briefly over her shoulder, as if checking for anyone else. "The one you're investigating, and it's become complicated." Erica's pulse quickened. Asterisk looking into the same operation. Asterisk, that was the last thing she needed to hear right now. She'd been working this case for months, and every piece of it was a tightrope walk. One misstep, and it could all come crashing down. If another agent was involved, especially one showing up like this, it meant only one thing. Asterisk, she wasn't the only one who'd been compromised. Asterisk. The words hit Erica like a punch to the gut. Her mind reeled. She'd suspected something was off. That feeling she couldn't shake, the creeping suspicion that someone was watching her every move, hadn't been paranoia. It was real. And now she realized it wasn't just a matter of personal safety. The stakes had escalated beyond anything she could have anticipated. "Are you saying they've been tracking me?" Erica asked, her voice barely above a whisper, the weight of the revelation sinking in. "Yes," Myers replied, his eyes scanning the shadows in the parking garage, as if to make sure no one else was listening. "And I'm not the only one they've been watching." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of distant footsteps echoed through the garage, but it could have been anyone. The air felt thick with danger, and Erica's mind spun with new possibilities, each darker than the last. If someone had infiltrated the bureau, if they were monitoring her every move, then every plan she'd made was compromised. She couldn't trust anyone, not even this man in front of her, who claimed to be an ally, not after everything that had already happened today. She narrowed her eyes. "If you're really with the bureau, then why didn't you warn me sooner?" Myers hesitated, his gaze flicking briefly to the floor. "I couldn't. Not without putting you in more danger." Erica's stomach twisted. There was something off about his tone, something he wasn't saying. "So now you're here to help me," she said, her voice laced with skepticism. "You're really going to try to convince me that after all this time, you've been following me and you're only just asterisk now ready to talk?" His expression hardened, and for a second, Erica thought she saw a flicker of guilt cross his face. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a cold determination. "We don't have time to debate this. We need to move. Now." Erica felt her pulse quicken as the gravity of his words sank in. The urgency was clear, but she couldn't ignore the nagging doubt at the back of her mind. Asterisk called she'd trust him. Asterisk, she had no choice but to make a decision, and quickly. The walls were closing in. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed again, cutting through the heavy silence. She pulled it out, her fingers trembling as she saw the new message. Asterisk security breach. Move fast, they're closing in. Asterisk. Her blood ran cold. The message was from a different contact within the bureau, someone she trusted implicitly. This wasn't just a random warning. It was confirmation that the situation had escalated beyond her control. "I don't have time to explain," Myers said, his voice firm, as if sensing the shift in her thoughts. "But if you're not ready to run, you're already too late." Erica's heart pounded in her chest. Her mind raced through her options, each one more dangerous than the last. But she knew there was no turning back now. If she stayed, she'd be caught in the crossfire. If she left, she could be walking into an ambush. The decision was clear, but it didn't make it any easier. With a steady breath, Erica nodded. "Lead the way," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Myers didn't hesitate. Without another word, he turned, his movements swift and purposeful. Erica followed close behind, every step echoing in the hollow space of the garage. As they moved deeper into the shadows, she couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't just running from something. They were running towards something or someone. And in that moment, she realized that the true scale of the operation was even more dangerous than she'd imagined. They reached the exit door, and Myers pushed it open with a quiet creak. Just as they stepped into the dimly lit alley outside, Erica's phone buzzed once more, the screen lighting up with a single cryptic message. Asterisk, asterisk, it's already too late. You're already compromised. Asterisk, asterisk. Erica's blood ran cold as she looked up at Myers, the pieces finally falling into place. The people behind this, whoever they were, had already anticipated her every move. The game had changed, and she was playing it blind. Erica's mind raced as she read the last message, her heartbeat quickening. It's already too late. You're already compromised. The words blurred on the screen, but the meaning cut through her like a knife. Her hand shook, her grip tightening on the phone as her eyes darted around the dim alley, searching for answers, trying to piece together the puzzle that was quickly slipping out of her control. Myers glanced at her, but didn't say anything. His face was grim, set in a way that only added to the weight of her growing unease. They had barely stepped into the alley when the distant sound of tires screeching reached their ears. Someone was closing in. Fast. Erica's body went rigid, instinct kicking in. She could feel the hairs on the back of her neck rise. This wasn't just a random encounter. They were being hunted. "We need to keep moving," Myers urged, his voice low, but urgent. "They're already here." Erica didn't need any more convincing. Her eyes quickly scanned the area. The narrow alley wasn't exactly a safe haven. There were no doors to duck into, no quick exits. It was a dead end, with a chain-link fence at the far end. The sounds of approaching vehicles grew louder, and she could hear the low hum of an engine idling nearby. It was getting closer. But just as she turned to head toward the fence, a vehicle screeched to a halt at the other end of the alley. Her breath caught in her throat. A black SUV. Not just any SUV. This one was too polished, too expensive. This wasn't a random car. These people were prepared. "Stay close," Myers muttered, pulling her to the side, his hand briefly touching her arm. His grip was firm, but there was something else in his eyes. A flicker of fear, something that made Erica's stomach churn. The door of the SUV slammed open, and a tall figure stepped out. Erica's heart stopped in her chest. She recognized the man immediately. It was Agent Miller. She'd worked with him on several cases before, but there was something different about him now. His expression, the way his jaw was clenched. It wasn't the face of a colleague. This was the face of someone on the other side. "Miller." Erica's voice was barely a whisper, but it felt like it was too loud in the heavy silence of the alley. His eyes flicked toward her, then to Myers, and his lips twisted into a knowing smile. "You're a little out of your depth, Agent Williams," he said, his voice eerily calm. "I'd suggest you stop running. This game's over." Erica felt a chill run down her spine. Miller had been one of the last people she'd expected to be involved in this. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. He wasn't just a witness to what was happening. He was orchestrating it, and now he was making his move. Her thoughts raced. Asterisk, how much did he know? Was he the leak asterisk? If Miller was behind this, it meant everything she'd worked for was in jeopardy. The case, her life, all of it. She wasn't just up against a shadowy network anymore. She was up against someone within the Bureau itself, someone who knew her every move. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and for the first time since this whole nightmare started, she was paralyzed with doubt. Had everything been a lie? Was Myers part of this too? Had he led her straight into Miller's trap? She barely registered when Myers moved in front of her, his stance protective, though there was no real way out. They were surrounded. "You're not getting out of here," Miller said, his voice smooth, almost amused. He didn't need to say more. The smug look on his face said it all. He had her cornered. The sound of another vehicle echoed down the alley, followed by more footsteps. Erica's pulse quickened. More backup. The odds were quickly stacking against her. She knew she couldn't stay and fight. Not with the stakes so high. Not with the game changing so quickly. She had to make a choice. "Why?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "Why are you doing this, Miller? What do you want from me?" Miller's eyes softened for a split second, almost as if he was considering her question. Then the smile returned. "You're asking the wrong question," he said. "The real question is, why did you think you were ever going to make it out alive?" Before Erica could respond, a sharp noise pierced the air, the unmistakable sound of gunshots. The first shot hit the ground in front of them, sending dust flying into the air. The second shot grazed the wall nearby. Erica's heart jumped into her throat, and her instincts kicked in. She shoved Myers aside, pulling him behind a stack of crates. Bullets hit the pavement where they'd been standing just seconds before. The air was thick with tension, the weight of the moment hanging heavy as Erica scrambled for cover. Her mind raced, calculating their options. Miller's men were closing in, and they weren't here to negotiate. Another vehicle pulled into the alley, this time a black van, its headlights glaring in the darkness. She knew she had seconds before they were surrounded. "Get to the van," Myers said, his voice tight with urgency. "Now." She didn't hesitate. The two of them darted across the alley, ducking behind dumpsters and crates as the gunshots rang out again. They were so close now. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Her hands were slick with sweat as she reached for her gun, but she couldn't risk using it here, not yet. They had to move fast. The van door slid open, and Myers shoved Erica inside before jumping in after her. The engine rolled to life as the door slammed shut. "We're not safe yet," Myers said through gritted teeth as the van tore down the alley, tires screeching. "You don't know what's coming next." Erica's breath caught in her throat. What could possibly be worse than this asterisk? As the van sped into the night, a cold realization settled in her chest. The people who had been tracking her, the ones who had orchestrated this whole mess, they weren't just after her. They were after everything. The case, the information she had. And now, the real game was about to begin. And Erica Williams was in the middle of it, completely out of her depth. The van sped through the darkened streets, the engine's roar filling the air as Erica's mind raced. She could feel the tension in her muscles, every nerve on edge. The gunshots, the close call in the alley, and now this frantic escape, it was all too much. She kept glancing at Myers, who was hunched forward, eyes scanning the rearview mirror, his face hard with determination. But Erica couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. What's the real game here? The van screeched to a halt at a deserted warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The lights flickered overhead, casting an eerie glow across the concrete yard. Myers didn't say a word as he jumped out, signaling for Erica to follow. She hesitated but followed, her senses on high alert. They were in too deep now. She didn't know who to trust, who was on her side, and the stakes were higher than ever. They entered the warehouse cautiously, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the walls. Inside, the atmosphere was oppressive, filled with shadows that seemed to stretch forever. Myers led the way, his movements swift and purposeful. Erica followed, trying to steady her breathing, but the weight of uncertainty pressed down on her like a physical force. Suddenly, they came to a halt. Myers raised his hand, signaling for silence. A figure stepped out from the shadows, tall and imposing, wearing a suit that screamed power. The man's face was familiar, though it took Erica a moment to place him. Director Hayes, she murmured under her breath, her heart sinking. The director of the FBI. The very person who should have been overseeing everything, the one who should have been protecting her. "You've been busy, Agent Williams," Hayes said coolly, his voice betraying no emotion. "But it's all over now." Erica's mind spun, the pieces of the puzzle finally starting to fall into place. Director Hayes. He had been behind this all along. He had orchestrated everything, the surveillance, the leaks, the threats. But why? What was the endgame? "You," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You've been behind all of it." Hayes didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped forward, his gaze piercing through her. "You think you understand, but you don't. All of this was necessary. You were a means to an end, Williams. You're just a pawn in a much bigger game." The words hit her like a slap. A pawn. Everything she had worked for, everything she believed in, nothing more than a part of his plan. She'd been manipulated from the very beginning. And now she was standing in front of the person responsible. But before she could process the magnitude of the betrayal, Myers stepped in front of her, his posture suddenly tense. "You didn't tell her, did you, Hayes?" His voice was calm, but there was a sharp edge to it now. "You didn't tell her the truth." Erica looked from Myers to Hayes, confusion flooding her mind. "What truth?" she demanded. "What are you talking about?" Hayes' lips curled into a tight smile, but there was no warmth in it. "The truth is simple, Agent Williams. You've been working for the wrong side this entire time." A chill ran down Erica's spine. What did he mean by that asterisk? "Myers," Hayes continued, his eyes never leaving Erica's, "isn't just another agent. He's been working with me all along. We're both trying to protect something much bigger than your little investigation." Myers stiffened. "It's more than you could ever understand. You've been chasing the wrong leads, focusing on the wrong targets. The real players, the ones pulling the strings, they're much higher up than you think." Erica's head spun. The revelation was too much. Everything she had believed, everything she had fought for. Was it all a lie? She took a step back, the weight of the truth pressing down on her chest. "You were using me," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "This whole time, I thought I was making a difference. But I was just part of your game." Hayes' smile widened. "Exactly. But now you're about to make a choice. A choice that will determine your future. Because if you walk out of here, you'll be walking into a world of enemies. And if you stay, well, let's just say, we can offer you a position of power. You could be one of us." The offer hung in the air, tempting yet sinister. Erica's mind raced. She was standing at the crossroads of her life. She could walk away, leave everything behind, and expose them. Or she could join them, gain their trust and power. But she knew deep down that there was no coming back from that. "Myers," she said, turning toward him, her voice raw with emotion. "Is this really what you want? You've been working with him all along." Myers didn't answer immediately. For a moment, his eyes seemed conflicted. But then he met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry, Williams, but this is bigger than both of us. I didn't want to drag you into this, but the truth is, you're already in it. We all are." Erica's breath caught in her throat. She had been a pawn in their game from the start, but that didn't mean she had to stay that way. The decision hit her like a jolt of electricity. She couldn't walk away, not without fighting for what she believed in. She couldn't join them. She had to expose them, no matter the cost. Before either of them could react, Erica's hand was on her gun, and in a blur of motion, she drew it. The silence shattered as she leveled the weapon at Hayes and Myers. "You can't make me a pawn any longer," she said, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding. "This game ends now." Hayes' eyes narrowed, and Myers didn't move. But Erica could see the smallest hint of doubt flicker in their eyes. The power had shifted. For the first time, she was in control. But just as she was about to make her move, the unexpected happened. The door of the warehouse crashed open, and a group of armed agents stormed in, their guns raised. They were wearing the same uniform as Maya's. The trap had been set. Erica's mind raced, but in that moment it didn't matter. She had made her choice, and now it was time to face the consequences. Before she could react, a shot rang out, striking the floor near her feet. She looked up, and the world around her began to shift again. The unexpected twist wasn't just a choice. It was the moment everything changed, and it was no longer clear who was friend or foe. The story wasn't over yet. It was only just beginning. The shot rang out, deafening in the silence that had followed Erica's declaration. Her heart skipped a beat, and for a brief moment, everything seemed to freeze. The armed agents who had stormed the warehouse were closing in, but none of them fired again. The tension in the room was palpable, like the calm before a storm. Erica's fingers tightened around her gun, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was no longer the one in control. Her mind raced. The agent who had fired the warning shot stepped forward, his face hard and unreadable. "Drop your weapon, Agent Williams," he commanded, his voice like ice. His gun was trained directly at her, steady and unblinking. "You're outnumbered." For a brief moment, Erica considered her options. She could try to fight her way out, but she'd be putting herself in the crossfire. She could drop her weapon and surrender, but that would mean everything she had uncovered, everything she had fought for, would be buried. She would be just another pawn in their game. The gun in her hand felt heavier than ever, and the weight of the choice pressed down on her. But there was something else she felt, something deeper than fear or anger. It was a sense of clarity. This wasn't just about survival. This was about integrity. She had uncovered the truth, and she wasn't going to let them bury it. Not now, not ever. With a sudden motion, Erica threw her gun to the ground, the loud clang of metal echoing through the warehouse. The agent who had spoken to her kept his weapon aimed at her, but she didn't flinch. She was done running, done pretending she didn't have a choice. "Take her into custody," the agent said, his voice cold. Erica didn't resist as they moved toward her, their hands firm as they handcuffed her. But as they led her toward the exit, something inside her clicked. She wasn't being captured. She was being protected. Myers was watching her, his eyes still filled with conflict, but something about his posture had changed. He wasn't the cold, calculating man she had first thought him to be. He was different now. The truth had hit him too, and he knew there was no going back. As they stepped out of the warehouse into the harsh glow of the streetlights, Erica could see the agents gathering around them, ready to move out. It was clear now that she wasn't alone in this fight. She had been playing a bigger part in this puzzle than she had realized. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper as the agents began to move her toward an unmarked vehicle. Myers hesitated before responding, his voice low. "We're going to expose this, Williams. Every last bit of it. Director Hayes won't be able to cover this up. He's gone too far." Erica looked at him, her mind still processing everything that had happened. The realization that Hayes had orchestrated it all, had used them all, was still sinking in. But now Myers was working with her. He was still on her side. They were going to bring this to light. The journey back to headquarters was long and silent. Erica kept her eyes fixed on the road ahead, her thoughts whirling. There were so many questions left unanswered. How had Hayes managed to infiltrate so deeply within the Bureau? How many others were part of his network? And what was the ultimate goal behind everything? But one thing was certain. The system had failed, but there were still people willing to fight for the truth. People like Myers. People like her. When they finally arrived, Erica was taken into a secure room where she was debriefed. As she recounted everything she knew, every piece of the puzzle that had been pieced together over the past few weeks, she realized the magnitude of what they were up against. This wasn't just one corrupt agent. This was a network, a deep, well-organized conspiracy that went far beyond what she had ever imagined. But with the evidence she had gathered, with the pieces of the puzzle now in place, they had a fighting chance. The walls that had once seemed so solid, so impenetrable, were starting to crack. And Erica knew that if they moved fast enough, if they used the resources they had left, they could take down Hayes and everyone involved in his web. It wasn't going to be easy. The road ahead was still filled with danger, and she wasn't sure who she could trust. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She had been through too much. She had seen the darkness that could exist in the very systems meant to protect people, and now she was determined to burn it all to the ground. As the sun began to rise, casting a pale light over the city, Erica sat in the quiet room, looking out the window. She had lost a lot over the past few weeks: friends, allies, trust. But she had gained something too: clarity, purpose, and the understanding that the fight was far from over. There was still so much more to uncover, so many more layers to peel back. But Erica Williams wasn't going to stop. Not now, not ever. The truth was out there, and she was going to make sure it saw the light of day.